We're good? All right. This budget hearing is called to order. Today's date is Thursday, May 13th, 2021. Ms. Hayes, will you please call roll?
Councilwoman Robinson.
Present.
Councilwoman Logan.
Present.
Councilwoman Johnson. And Chair Morgan.
Here. All right, we have several items on today's agenda. First up is housing and community development. Can I get a motion and a second on the operating budget for HCD? Morgan seconds. So it's been moved by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Councilman Morgan. And Ms. Albertson, the floor is yours. If you'll just introduce yourself and your team, we'll do a presentation and save questions until the end.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Mbe Albertson. I'm serving as the Interim Director for Housing and Community Development in our brief hiatus between directors, usually the Deputy Director. I'm joined by my colleagues, Harry Green, who's our Senior Operations Administrator, and LaTanya Alexander, who's our Budget Manager. So just a little bit about our division. You can see our organization chart. We are primarily divided into two major groups, one the operations side and the second are the program side. So in our operations, we have obviously our internal HR, legal, monitoring and compliance, which is super important because most of our funds are through the federal government. So we have a lot of staff who are very experienced in compliance with our federal programs. And then we have our finance area, as well as our planning and policy. Then our program side, we're divided into housing, economic development, and community development. And under housing, we have our nonprofit housing department, our single and multifamily affordable housing area, and our down payment assistance department. Under economic development, we have community development and initiatives, a lead-based paint hazard reduction program, and our inspection services, which kind of services our entire development and housing areas. And then under community development, we have our Office of Neighborhood Engagement, as well as homelessness and special needs. So in terms of our strategic priorities addressed by this budget, we have a number of programs aimed to increase homeownership in the city of Memphis. We have three down payment assistance programs, one for public safety and teachers, one through our federal home program, which is for affordable housing down payment assistance, and then a more middle income program with targeted zip codes that's really aimed at encouraging homeownership in certain areas of the city. Then we also, another priority is the development of healthy and affordable housing. So we have several programs that are aimed at this. We have a weatherization program that we have in-house. We have a program to address removing lead-based paint hazards. We make funds available to nonprofit and for-profit developers for construction or rehabilitation of single family and multifamily housing, and that's both rental and owner occupied. We have now an emergency rental assistance program that we've just gotten started this year, which is a follow-up to a program to prevent evictions that we had last year at the beginning of the pandemic. And then we also have supportive housing programs for homeless and our vulnerable populations. And then last, we make funds available for community and economic development projects. We make funds available through a competitive grant process for public service programs. We have a neighborhood partnership program, which is a city-funded grant program, and for neighborhood and economic development opportunities. So looking at our FY21 expenditures to the FY22, any of the adjustments to our budget mid-year were due to funds allocated through the CARES Act. And for our division specifically, these were for homeless shelters and an eviction program. We also had an adjustment. We got some weatherization revenue in the amount of $200,000 from Memphis Housing Authority. And we also adjusted our budget to increase it by $160,000 that we needed to round out our housing trust fund. In terms of our comparative spending, our FY21 adopted budget was about a little over 4.8 million, which is basically the request for FY22. And although this increase and decrease looks a little striking, again, that's due to those adjustments that were added to our adopted budget mid-year for CARES Act and the other sources that I mentioned. So our FY22 request of 4.832 is more in alignment with our FY21 adopted budget before those adjustments were made, with an overall difference of about $33,000. So some of these changes of the year-over-year changes in our expenditures. In personnel, we have a reduction of salaries based on variances of grant-funded positions that were vacant. Then the other variances are really amounts that are outside of our budget process, insurance and things like that, the pension. And then in materials and supplies, we had been charging our IT costs to a service center that wasn't the most appropriate account. So we're reducing the amount in that account to increase it by the same amount, $55,000, to put it in a place where it really should be charged to. And then the other differences are really just, again, the insurance and then some encumbrances that we're rolling over that we won't have anymore. No changes in capital outlay. And then things to highlight under grants and subsidies. Again, there's the COVID CARES Act funding that we won't have in the upcoming year. We had $100,000 for weatherization, and that was intended to advance funding for weatherization activities due to a delay in getting reimbursements through the state for that. So as soon as we would get that reimbursement for the state, we would expense recover that the same amount under that line. And then we are requesting an increase to our down payment assistance program budget. We had a $100,000 decrease for each of our two programs last year, given adjustments that were needed to balance the overall budget. So we are requesting the restoration of the $100,000 for both the public safety and teacher program, as well as the program you see under that called middle income housing. This is the program that I mentioned that we target zip codes throughout the city for down payment assistance. And under River Parks docking, we anticipate a reduction in the fees, the docking fees that we receive from Great American Steamboat, because they've not really been operating over the past year. So we have a total budget usually of around $300,000, and we're anticipating around $100,000 decrease in that revenue source. Then just the last items are, again, those just encumbrance roll forwards that we won't carry forward again, and then that weatherization funding from Memphis Housing Authority that we won't be receiving again. Touched on this a minute ago, but the reduction anticipated for our revenue is one reduction is we used to receive fees from Raymond James for parking fees, and so they have moved and terminated their lease with the city. So we will no longer have that as a revenue source. And then again, as I mentioned, we are anticipating a decrease in revenue from the docking fees with Great American Steamboat. So that's reflected in this reduced revenue projection. And the next slide just has a little bit more detail about each of those. So for our personnel, we currently in FY21 had 70 positions in the complement. We will move into FY22 with a total of 66. The only changes are a move from administration to community initiatives 2 positions that increased so that area from 13 to 15. And then we had a reduction in 4 vacant positions that are not in the FY22 budget. So our total major M&S expenses are listed in this chart. Expenses totaling little over $608,000, with our most expensive being insurance and miscellaneous professional services, with the other lines listed below. Our other M&S is just a roll-up of any other M&S items in our budget, which includes things like City Hall printing, City Hall shop charges, our advertising for public notices that we have, and things of that nature. And in professional services, we have one professional services contract that we will be also utilizing in FY22, and this is with a technical assistance provider called Corporate Facts. They are a HUD certified technical assistance provider. They have been helping us with some compliance items, especially in our finance and accounting areas, including some grant reconciliations. They're helping us refine our timesheets to really more capture the amount of time that we're spending on each of our grant programs. And so those types of things we have found them to be very helpful in also updating some of our policies and procedures around our accounting and finance areas as well. We do not have any leases, so this slide is not applicable to us. And then for the time frame reported as of June 30, 2020 for Mbe Wbe Utilization, you'll see we had a combined certified and non-certified spend of a little over $7 million with a percentage of 49.42%. I did check in with Director Massey to see if we could get a little more updated information. I know there will be a presentation forthcoming, but for Q1 and Q2 of FY21, we did have a certified spend of about 84%, or a little over $2 million for certified spend. And then the remaining slides, I know you've seen a lot of these, are just our 5-year trend. So this really concludes our remarks and presentation, but we will happily answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you just remind me real quick about this line item with federal grant match on personnel that used to be in place, but is now, looks like it's zeroed out? And just the history of, I guess, the origin of that and why, and then if you go back far enough in the 5 years to FY18, there's no full-time salaries or federal grant match.
Sure. So we used to keep we had just a handful of employees on the general fund side. I think it was literally 4 or 5. And we had most of our employees on the federal side. And what we were discovering in recent years is that it was, and my colleagues can add to this because they're the ones that had to deal with it, but it was getting to be kind of a nightmare to do all the journal entries and budget transfers to everyone was charged to the city, and then we would reimburse on a line by line, salary by salary item from the federal funds, which was our block grant funds, our home funds, and some of our other federal funds. So what we thought was a better solution is that we have everyone on the general fund side and have a budget for salaries, and then we are allotted percentages that we can spend on administration under each of our grant programs. So, for example, for community development block grant, we can spend 20% of our annual allocation, which is usually around 1.2. So we would just have an expense recovery line for that amount, and then same for the other percentages that we're allowed to spend for each federal program. So the idea is that we're just expense recovering that entire 20% amount as it's spent, and not on a person by person basis. But if I'm missing something, please.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. If that makes sense. It was very confusing to me at first. So
it almost makes sense. So almost there. And then just for perspective, what we have in front of us is a little over $4.8 million. But what is the total scope of y'all's budget? All monies included, federal, state, whatever it might be.
For our annual entitlement, and this includes program income that we receive for community development block grant, as well as home, we do get some loan paybacks and things, and Bass Pro Pyramid pays us back their lease amount every year, and that gets counted toward our community development block grant program income. The 4 programs plus the 2 program income in the federal budget side is around $15 million annually. And then we get a weatherization grant through the state.
It's $3 million for 3 years.
$3 million over a 3-year period. We currently have, we also apply for competitive grants as often as we see an opportunity that would be a good fit for us. So we were recently awarded, I think our 10th lead-based paint hazard reduction grant through U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that's solely to address lead-based paint hazard. And that was a little over $5 million? 5.8 million, which is our largest grant to date in that program. We have a few other smaller grants for specific projects through the Park Service and some others. We have I think we came to you recently for a grant from Living Cities to help us with our housing policy plan that we want to undertake working with OPB. But those are the largest pots of money that we have currently.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council members? Councilman Jones?
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome. Can you provide just a little bit more information about the functions that were, I'm on page 14, the functions that were in last year's budget, but not in this year's budget?
LaTanya, can you remind me of which vacancies were?
There were actually swap positions that were upgraded, like an analyst got upgraded to a coordinator position, so the vacancy of the analyst was still sitting active. And so we had those positions removed because we were not going to fill it because the person that was occupying that position was promoted to a coordinator or an upper position that was not in the complement.
Okay, and so is that the case for the other 3? Is it multiple? Okay, thank you. That was the only question I had, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other council members? All right, seeing none, I assume you're ready to move to a voice vote. All those in favor of HCD operating budget signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Opinion chair, the ayes have it. This operating budget is approved. Thank you very much. Next up is engineering. Can I get a motion and a second on the engineering budget? Second. All right, moved by Councilman Warren, seconded by Councilman Jones. Director Belen, if you'll introduce yourself again and the team that you've got with you today, then the floor is yours to present, and we will hold questions until the end of the presentation.
Thank you. Manny Belen with the Division of Engineering. So I have with me today is my team members, Jack Stevenson. He's the administrator for land development in my budget. I have Ms. Mary Williams back in the back. She's the admin support. I do have another individual that's coming in, Randall Tatum. He's my administrator for traffic, so he's going to join in as well shortly here. So we'll start with the presentation. First is our organizational chart illustrated there. Currently, we have 5 sub tasks on each one of these. One is our land development process or land development divisions. The other is civil design, transportation planning, our traffic engineering, and our survey and construction. Next slide. Division. Strategic priorities include our youth, neighborhoods, and local government. Next slide. Now we're moving into our expenditure discussion. For our FY21 adopted budget, total expenditure was a little over $7.4 million. We did have some rollover from FY21. That's roughly around $353,000. We did make a request during the second quarter of FY21 for an adjustment of $1.8 million. So that brings us with a total expenditure after adjustment at $1.8 million, with a FY21 funding budget of $9.6 million. And our current request for 22 is $9.9 million. Next slide, please. So comparatively, for FY21 adopted, again, it was $7.4 million. With the roll forward as well as the adjustment, we're looking at a FY21 funding budget of $9.6 million. Our current request, previously stated, was or is $9.9 million. There is an increase in our request, and that's roughly about a 2.5% increase from previous years. Next slide. The next slide talks about the FY22 changes in our expenditures. Majority of the expense is personal services. $208,000 of that is full-time salaries. We did add 2 positions for grants, as well as obtaining the prevailing wage staff from finance into absorbing it into engineering for those positions. And so our total net expenditures is $248,000 roughly. On the revenue side, we do not expect or project any sort of changes in our revenue side. So this identifies some of the revenue lines that the division gets, and at this point we project it to be a total for the proposed 22 at roughly $1.6 million. Next slide. Again, we don't anticipate any changes in our revenue. On the personnel side, our current FY21 authorized complement is 119. Our proposed for 22 is actually 124. That increases our authorized complement by 5. As I indicated previously, we absorbed the prevailing wage team from finance into engineering. We determined that that team aligned better with our division since we handle a lot of the contract work, and so prevailing wage ties into that fairly well. It is budget neutral, so the funding coming out of the prevailing wage team just comes over to the engineering budget. The other 3 position is in anticipation of the additional work and effort that's going to be associated with the Accelerate Memphis initiative. We anticipate adding 3 additional personnel on that to help push those projects along. We do have some vacancies. Part of the vacancies are we've had a couple recently that passed, so that the reflection on here on the vacancy related to those, as well as we have posted numerous of our positions, sort of like what other divisions had relative to challenges getting hired individuals. We are specialized in that field as well, and so it's very competitive out there. So when we post positions for engineers, oftentimes those get picked by the private sector more than the public sector. So we compete to those as well. Again, it's not because of the lack of us posting the positions, because we have to post some of these positions numerous times. Next slide. Next slide is our major M&S expenditures. I'm just going to outline just the two of the highest. One is our miscellaneous professional services line. That's roughly about 34% of our total M&S. We'll go through the breakdown of that. And then the next one is our miscellaneous services and charges, which is roughly about 11% of our total budget. Next slide. As I indicated, the 34% of our M&S is professional services. This is the breakdown of that professional services. So we have roughly 6 professional services consultants that we utilize at this point. 4 of those are actually EBO firms. And so that reflects our 34% of that total professional services. Next slide. Engineering has no leases. Next. As of June 30th, the total MWBE spent for the division is at 43%. Roughly 27% of that is certified MBE spend, and another 16% is WBE spend. I know there was one time that was asked about, how we're doing on our first and second quarter of 21. We were able to get that information, and it's between quarter 1 and quarter 2, our division is currently at roughly around 55% of MWBE. The next several slides is our 5-year expense trend. And I will leave it up to council members to review those. And with that, we conclude our presentation and we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from council members? Councilwoman Johnson? Goodbye.
On page 3, you said that your priorities for youth and neighborhoods. Tell us, how do you explain proposing that in your budget? I didn't hear anything in regards to that.
Sure. So I'll just go for each one. Obviously, youth. We often get asked to help facilitate around schools. And so often they'll request for school zones per se, slow down traffic and things like that. So we put forth effort to help in that fashion. So that's one way of us contributing to that strategic priority. Our neighborhoods, similarly, we get complaints about traffic and the speeding. So our Speed Home program helps with that process as well. And then same thing with from a signage perspective. So regulatory signage, we'll make sure that that happens. So that's how we participate in the neighborhood side. And then government, of course, we are, from a budgetary perspective, we want to make sure that we maintain with what the budget we were approved of, and we make sure that we are complying with that.
I mean, you mentioned it. I was just waiting on it to be said during your presentation. Somehow, this department does this for youth, this department does that for the neighborhoods, since that was your priority. I thought it was good that you mentioned it on the front end, but I didn't hear it being talked about throughout your presentation. I'd love to hear that. Okay. Next question on page 5. Material and supplies for your adjustment. Was that for professional services this year? That number seems to be close to professional service. What was that 1,800,000 for?
I'm sorry, Councilwoman.
Page 5.
Councilwoman, I'll answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, the adjustment last year, as we were in the middle of the pandemic, we were doing the FY21 budget. We were down to the wire with getting the budgets balanced, and so the administration took $1.8 million out of engineering's budget. That was, quite frankly, all of their professional services that they needed to do the work. And so we asked you to put it back during the course of this year. That was something we did just to get the budget in balance right before we went to budget. And we undercut engineering's ability to deliver services by doing that, so we put it back.
Okay. I had a question on page 8 about full-time salaries. Oh, grant managers. Are those some of the personnel that was moved over into your department, or is that a new position, grant managers? Uh-huh.
Those are new positions. Their position is to capitalize on utilizing federal and state funding. So the team for the grant manager back from the state.
Okay, that's all one that purposes. And I have one other question. On your traffic signals on page 10, so what's 165? On page 10, traffic signals. What are you gonna do with that?
Insurance.
That's insurance claims.
Insurance.
Yeah, so that traffic signal line is for, is it claims?
Yes, it's where we repair damage.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so this is, when you'll see in the news, a car hits a traffic signal, right? And we have to go ahead and make that repair. And so that line is what's used to make that necessary repair, immediately.
And
So
you charge it back to the city?
that's correct, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Revenue from insurance.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones?
Thank you. I'm on the same page, but now this is a revenue.
Right, so that is, what when we make the repair, it's an expenditure, and then we charge the insurance company for that, and so it comes back to us as revenue. That's correct.
Gotcha. So I'm on this page too. When we look at these overall fees, and I know that, for instance, the pedestrian scooter rent, that's a newer fee, but my question is, in general, how long have these, the various fee structures been in place? Are there any that we haven't updated since the early 2000s? So just wanted to get an idea of how often are the fees reviewed? How long has this structure been in place? I know there are numerous ones. If you need to get back on with me on that, to have a more comprehensive answer.
Sure. I guess we'll touch base on the scooter part, since that's the one you brought up.
Well, no, I just said, I know that one would be a more recent fee, but for instance, the street cut inspection fee, when was the last time we updated that? If it was 1989, so I'm just trying to get a general idea of these different revenue structures, revenue sources, and fees associated with it. Are there any that we haven't reviewed in some time?
We recently reviewed all of our structures for our fees, and in fact, we presented to council those modifications based on market, what we see it, both on the market plus our comparative studies on that, and council approved those changes this recent year. So we do review it. We review it every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years.
And thank you for approving that, and so. We're at, to answer your question, yes, we're reviewing it.
Okay. Yeah, I think I recall perhaps Public Works. I didn't know whether it was Public Works or your department or both that we did it. So thank you.
Councilman, we asked all the divisions 2 years ago to do a comprehensive review of all the revenues for exactly that reason. And so there shouldn't be anything that's older that hasn't been reviewed since at least 2018. Probably time to go back and look again. There's still a few, Manny's working through with some of our agreements that we have agreements with people to do services, but some of those will be updated. But so everybody's looked through, and we should be relatively as of 2018.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. My question would just be towards full-time salaries again. It looks like what we're forecasting is a bit of a dip compared to the actuals in 20 and 19, and then what we're proposing in 22. And I know you've got some vacancies, but is it $1 million worth of vacancies? Our forecast adds up to 5.85. And I know there's some new spots coming over, but not many.
Yeah, total vacancies. With the total vacancies, we're roughly around $600,000 in vacancies. So that's the total. And then from the oh, I see. Yeah, so all of the full-time salaries absorbs the holiday salary full-time, the vacation leave. So all those rolls into the...
Correct. I've already collapsed those up.
Okay.
And that's where, yeah, it went from 4.836 to 5.851.
Okay.
And so I know it's not a big number in terms of your attrition because you don't have a lot of vacant positions, but this may be another case where it didn't get subtracted out. Because if you filled all those vacancies, $600,000, you added on to this forecast, you still wouldn't get to 6.88 million.
Remember the temps have to be brought in.
And the likelihood of having no vacancies throughout the entire year is pretty slim for any division.
So yeah, so I guess the way we would answer that question is, so we add on to the vacancies that we have, $600,000. We do have, we've added 3 additional grants managers. Those are often added as a temporary for now, since those have not been approved previously. So it'll come in as a temporary salary. That will be added back to our full-time salaries at that point, and that's roughly around $440,000.
Oh, for the grant writers?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So that makes up the difference of the $1 million.
Okay. Yeah. Assuming that all those positions are full throughout the entire year,
Yes,
then we'll hit that number. Okay. All right. Thank you, Councilman Smiley.
Yes, sir. So that is a projected dollar value that we would expect from numerous claims that would often transfer to the engineering division. So I'll give you an example. So if there was a sidewalk issue and there was a claim that was vetted through our legal team and we have found to be at fault, then it comes out of that line.
So what was the expenditure last year, about $300,000 last year?
That's correct. And really, it's a projection number because we don't know. Some of these claims can last multiple years. And so this is our effort to project what we think it's going to cost us in terms of our claims. And those numbers, we work together with our legal division to determine what that is.
So sidewalk, what other type of things?
I mean, one is, I think most recent one we paid is a traffic signal light fell on some vehicle and we ended up paying for that. So those types of things happen, and it's not, it's uncommon, but when it does happen, we have to be able to pay for those claims.
So somebody runs into a pothole,
The pothole typically would come out of Public Works', yes.
Outside phone and communication. Is that cell phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. About how many employees have cell phones? Just a few? A lot?
I mean, they all have cell phones because that's
Okay.
the way we communicate now.
Okay.
I mean, we don't do the walkie-talkies anymore like we used to, but I would say majority of my personnel do have cell phones.
Okay. And how many
Currently it's 119 with the request to add another 5, so it'll be 124 for 22.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones.
Thank you. I want to go again to you weren't here yesterday, but we had a discussion. We have 12 vacant positions here, and I'm questioning how we advertising and making them known. I know it's an HR issue, so I just went to the city's website, clicked on engineering, it only shows one position. So how is somebody who may be an engineer with that background, could be various jobs within engineering, how are they supposed to know about it? Where do they go to find those particular positions?
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Councilman Jones. So we work obviously with our HR division relative to posting of the positions themselves. That position that you're alluding to right now that's on the board is the engineering designer A position. That was actually posted on April the 26th and through the 4th, so it ended last week. Most of these positions that we have currently vacated have had multiple repostings on them. So every time we request for reposting, we work with HR. We try to expand that net. So we often would want to request to be included in the various association like American Society of Professional Engineers or American Public Works Association. So we try to reach out in different publications to attract more people. So I mean, to answer your question is, I don't know, why there's only one position that's currently on the board, but I know from my reporting that majority of my positions have been reposted.
But and you weren't here and it sort of started with Public Works yesterday, and based upon various presentations, we know that we have hundreds of available jobs. But if we go to where, if I were just a layman looking to work for the city, first place that I would go to would be the city's website, and it's not clearly showing. And I know you're on HR, but I'm just, one of the things that I requested yesterday, I just want to show a different example. And I saw so many positions, and it still had this page up from yesterday. We have so many positions, but I don't think that the word is getting out on what would be our major platform, primary platform, that these positions are available. So, just one of the things that after budget hearings, I'm hopeful that there are more conversations with HR and making it more well known, the jobs that are available, not just your division, but the other ones as well. But since you're in front of me, thought I'd say something about engineering.
Thank you very much.
That availability.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. We do put forth effort as well to reach out to the universities.
Yeah, but let's say if I'm a student at University of Memphis right now, and look, graduation just happened, I need a job. I want to stay at home. I go to the city's website, and I only see one position. I may not, it may be other positions for which I'm qualified, but according to the website, if it's not an engineer designer A, I don't know. So that's the point. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. That's the emphasis here.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Any other, Councilman Warren?
I do think that's a uniform issue that we've gotten that Councilman Jones brought up, is that if we really do have these positions and we really are wanting to fill them, it seems like they should just be continuously on our website. And if we're not really wanting to fill them because we're doing it for budgetary reasons or we don't need them, that's another issue. So that's my question is, do we really need these? And if we do, why are we taking them off the website where I've only posted for a certain period of time? I don't expect you to answer that. I just think that's a general question that I'm hearing from the council. And I think we probably should try to figure that out. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree. I think Councilman Jones is right on with this. And it's not the full scope of what we do in terms of HR recruitment, but if we've got a spot on the website, let's use it and make sure that it comes up when people are searching for it under Google or anything like that. Chief Ford.
Thank you and good afternoon, Council. Shirley Ford, Chief Financial Officer. In light of the discussions that we've had through this period, Chief McGowan and I both noted that we should talk with HR because the system posts and it posts for X number period of days to see how many applications you get. you get in that period and then then it closes, right? So one of the things that we talked about just in the light of the conversation of the last couple of days is that there should be extended periods posting for certain positions, because if it's only out there for a 10-day period, then you might not see it, and it posted and then it came off, it posted and then it doesn't get filled and you repost it. And so I think there's a definite conversation, and thank you so much for this dialogue, but I think there's a definite conversation about changing and extending the period of time that a position is posted based on the period and how many hits the position is actually getting. I mean, like sometimes when I post a position in finance, I may get 35 applications in one day, right? And so it depends on the position, but I think there's definitely a point to be made about certain positions that have extended periods of not being filled. So thank you, Council.
Any other comments or questions from council members? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to move to a voice vote. All those in favor of the engineering operating budget signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chief Ford, can we make a note to check on the attrition line on this one as well? Okay. Yeah, let's. All right. Boy, do we? Man, Randall got out of here fast. I meant to ask him a question about some speed humps. St. Nick. Use control board this morning, and so they want those sharp ones. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It worked. Mm-hmm.
We also
We have another. All right, we're running a little ahead of schedule, which is wonderful news. Can I get a motion on information technology operating budget? Moved by Councilman Warren, second by Councilman Smiley. Director, Chief Bailey. If you will introduce yourself and your team, if anybody's joining us online, and then the floor is yours for a presentation. We'll hold questions until the end.
Okay, great. Hello, each and every one of you. Thanks for having us here representing the Information Technology Division. We have joining me Kimberly Bailey, the Chief Information Officer and Division Director, our Deputy Chief Information Officer, Wendy Harris, as well as our IT Finance Manager, Timothy Anderson. We also have joining online probably the entire ITD. Is a watch party for us today. And I just definitely want to start out by thanking all of our managers who are joining us, as well as every employee, for just being fantastic and making sure this process goes well for us. I want to give a special thanks to Kelly Workmeister. She was our interim finance manager for the last year, and has been very integral in making sure that our budget and presentation is on point. So special thanks to Kelly and everything that she did and her hard work. And the Information Technology Division reports to Finance, so I want to give a special thanks to Chief Ford for her support and leadership of this division. And that's all I have. I'm ready to get into the presentation. I wanted to let you all know that I gave you a copy of our year-end review for FY20. Every year, the ITD will do something similar so that you can see that we are actually doing things with the funds that you approve. So our previous budget, it shows everything that we have done. This was from the November 2019 to June 30th time period, and we are working on the year-end review for this current fiscal year. We try to have it ready in July, and by the time that's ready, I'm hoping to have meetings with each one of you to review it so that you can see everything that has taken place with the funding that you approved for us. But this is the previous year, and so look at it at your leisure, but just know the ITD appreciates what you all do for us, and this is the actions that we take in order to make sure the funding gets utilized properly, okay? We'll get started with the presentation. Slide 2 just shows a picture of our organization. We are made up of 88 employees, 62 of those are contract employees, but this splits us out between administration and operations. What's new from this year is, compared to last year, is that we are really building our project management office. We have currently right now 36 projects in flight, and so we're needing to kind of get more employees to help us push those projects through. Project management is a very important piece of IT implementations and the success of those. And we've also started to staff more in our business analyst role. Once we have good analysis at the beginning, we have more successful projects in the end. So this just gives you a picture of how our organization is currently set. On the strategic priorities addressed in this budget, I know I don't need to read every line of this, but I want us to know that for FY22, we are continuing to focus on our infrastructure implementations and innovation. Infrastructure projects, some of which you approved for our CIP budget, includes obsolete equipment replacement, our new disaster recovery site identification, asset management, cybersecurity compliance training, infrastructure and application monitoring, single sign-on, and automated pen testing. Implementations which are currently in flight and will be to come are MyTel telephone system upgrade, our EBS upgrade, the Treasury tax system. We're continuing with that implementation. We are working on fax by email, Chronos time and attendance solution, as well as an upcoming Hyperion upgrade. And our team is now looking more at a lean model, so we're adopting some agile methods to help us implement better. And innovation, we definitely want to make sure we are doing the best to stay current and look towards the future. So our MAP 901 projects, 5G, Google AI, digital transformation, as well as our cloud technology. These are things that we're looking at from an innovative standpoint. If we continue on to page 5, you can see the year-over-year budget. Very simple. If you look at the difference between FY21 and our proposed budget now, we're looking at, for a little bit more, not a huge difference in the ask, but this just helps us in our personnel side, the materials and supplies, just a little bit more of a difference between last year's funding budget and this one. We had a huge capital outlay project last year where we had to do a redesign so we could accommodate our service delivery technicians and make sure everything was COVID friendly for them and we could socially distance. That project is finishing up, and now we'll be able to do some more inventory initiatives so that we can have some inventory and on-site inventory at different locations so that they don't all have to come to the ITD. They can work from the library or even from City Hall. And so that's what we'll be doing with the additional $25K for next year. And if you look at the $51K for the COVID-19, that was given back to the division from finance generously. So we thank you for that. And that was for DocuSign. DocuSign is electronic signature. It was very important to have that in place so that we could sign documents without being in the building, up to the mayor and back. So that was what we were reimbursed for DocuSign. If you go to page 7, you can see what the different budget lines are, but the thing to point out is we're asking for a 6.6% increase overall from last budget until this one. One of the reasons is you all approved when I came before you for phone bill increase, when I needed additional funding to help with those FCC costs of a phone bill. We, put that in the budget for this upcoming fiscal year, as well as some of our software costs. It's pretty hard for IT to stay flat every year when we have increasing costs, especially with Microsoft and our Oracle Fusion. An example with Microsoft, in 2019, the cost was around $959K. And for FY20, 1.8 million, well, 1.1 million. And then the next fiscal year, 1.4. So it goes up every year. So it's pretty hard for us to keep that same amount of money when the companies themselves are increasing. So that is, will show you the difference and explain why we're just asking for a little bit more than last year. On the next page, page 8, it goes through the various personnel costs, materials and supplies, the capital outlay. But what I want to definitely call out is the outside phone and communications. You can see the $979K. That again is the largest increase, and that is for those phone bills, so that we can make sure we don't have to come before you, hopefully, again, to ask for an increase there. As we move on to page 10, again, that's the revenues bridge. When we get into the division detail, the personnel information on page 14, it just speaks to how our division is currently staffed. And what we are asking you for is 4 additional employees, so an increased service level of 4. Last year, we had 5 vacancies. Now we have 2, and 1 is in the interview stage. So we've done a very good job of filling the positions that you approved for us. And we are looking for that 4-person increase so that we can staff in some areas that we don't have the skill set. And we're definitely bringing on a public safety cybersecurity element, someone who can focus on cybersecurity specifically for fire and police. And so that will be one of those 4 positions. If we move on to our materials and supply, when you look at our M&S, you can see that makes up about 49.57% of our budget. That includes our contracting staff, our cabling services, our fiber services. When we have to locate those services out in the different neighborhoods and communities, we have to pay for that. So that's what that budget is made of. When you look at personal computer software, that 25.79%, that includes IT pays completely for any IT software as well as anything for the enterprise. So when you think about Microsoft and Oracle, but we pay about 38% of other divisions. So other divisions have software costs, and that makes up about 38% of what we pay for out of our budget. We may have to look at that at some point because it may not be completely budget friendly going on as software costs continue to go up. But right now, 38% of that is for other divisions outside of IT. When you look at the city computer service equipment line, that's for when we have breaks and things we have to fix with our hardware as well as maintenance. We have to sometimes call in another company that owns that particular piece of software so that they can come in and make those repairs. And so that's what we have to pay for out of that line. And again, the telephones, that's our landlines as well as our wireless. And again, rent. We are located at 119 South Main, so a little bit down the street from you. Once we are all back in, I look forward to having you guys to come and visit with us. But we are in 119 South Main, so we have to pay for rent for that particular location. If you go to page 17, you can see a little bit more about our professional services with those vendors. These are mainly those 62 employees that we contract in to help us staff the IT division. Of these companies, it's 13 of them, but 7 of them our MWBEs. So we definitely look to try to partner with MWBEs to make sure that we staff our team. You can see we have a technology service desk that is outsourced that costs us about $850K a year. And again, you can see fiber and cabling costs and then right away for underground fiber. The next gives you, again, this is your personal invitation. You can see our address for where we're being leased, and you're welcome to come and visit us at any time. If you take a look on page 19 at our MWBE spend, you can see right now, as of June 30th of 2020, we were at the 47.606% spend for the total certified. Last year at this time, we were at 50.04. The total spend plus non-certified now is at 50.81. And last year we were at 53.78. So I think we're doing a great job, and we definitely want to continue to do even better with that. The numbers that we have currently, as of the first and second quarter, we're around 38.69% of our MWBE spend. And the last page is our 5-year expense trend. I'll be reading each line to you one at a time. I'm pointing. I won't do that to you. I won't read each line, but as you can see that you can see our trend of what it looks like from FY18 up until FY22, and it just gives us gives you a total picture of what our budgetary spend looks like. That is the presentation for the Information Technology Division. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you very much. Councilman Smiley, then Councilman Warren.
Thank you, Chief Bailey, Chief Director, all your titles. I have a couple questions. One, I think the rent at the Peabody Executive Suites, how big is the facility? Because it's $400,000.
So it is a pretty, I don't know the square footage, but it is a pretty big facility. We have all of our staff in one side, and then another staff, we have all of our inventory is stored there and an area for our service delivery. So every piece of inventory that comes into the ITD, there's an inventory cage. So right now we have two suites, suite 200.
So do we have the entire floor, or is it just?
There's a separate area that is unoccupied. I would like to have that.
Are we paying for that area?
No, we do not pay for that area, but we only pay for 2 suites on the second floor.
2 suites cost us $400,000?
It does.
Okay. So I recently just learned that we were there. I was going to visit a friend of mine. I ran into somebody wearing the city of Memphis badge. City of Memphis. So is there enough space to expand? Say if you wanted 20 different, you could add 20 different employees and put them there. Would you have enough space to do that?
Not in the current space, but in the space that's unoccupied, I think it would be a great place if we could do some expansion, especially around our help desk.
Okay, so in the unoccupied space, do we know how much it would cost us?
We actually do. We did get those information. We did get that information. It would cost us an additional, I think, around $25K to the rent that we have currently, and we get like a 2 to 3% increase every year. So that's what it would be.
And how long is the current lease with Peabody?
I think the lease ends, I think it's June of next year.
Okay.
But I could be incorrect. I will make sure I know that before I get up from this.
Who does the negotiation?
Who does the negotiation? Really, there's not a lot of negotiating.
Oh, Lord, they don't like it.
It's not a lot. We've been in that facility for some time. We were there when I became the director of this division.
Do you know how long we've been in?
I'm not sure when we actually moved in.
You've been here a long time.
It used to be in a facility off of Covington Pike, and we wanted them closer to downtown. There wasn't sufficient room at City Hall, so in about 2015, I think former IS Director Nair negotiated that lease to move them into that place. One of the things we're looking at, Councilman Smiley, to your point, is there's an opportunity for us to consolidate some other city facilities. We have Union Extended where we have a lease. You know, we're looking for the opportunity to bring as many things in-house as we can and downtown as we can, with the exception of some of the other, community-based assets that you need to have in the community. So it's a good point. We're looking for that opportunity. We haven't found one yet for IT yet. This is the closest that we could get them for the time being.
Okay. All right. So the reason I asked a lot about the lease and the potential space is because as I look at the account details, professional services, and the CTD staff, I don't really know what type of employees or independent contractors they provide. I just want to know, is there an opportunity for us to bring some of this $2 million in-house? And I'm assuming, would they reduce our cost at all to bring it in-house? Or is it possible?
Bring the staffing in-house?
If we go through this line, $10 million account details, professional services, I'm assuming, and hope, maybe this is me just being hopeful, that we could potentially bring some of these services in-house. I'm not sure if they're providing, let's say, a gap in terms of what we can provide because we have limited staff and they go out and fill some of the places. If we could potentially bring in more employees to reduce this.
So the only way to really reduce this, Councilman Smiley, is to have more city employees.
That's what I'm talking about.
Bring them on.
That's what I'm talking about.
And so, that's something that Chief Ford would have to help me explain.
Giving Chief Ford more jobs. But $10 million is a lot of money, and it seems like we're just kicking it out. If we could reduce the cost by, bringing in more city employees, creating more jobs for us, that'd be great. Chief Ford?
Thank you.
Tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, because you tell me that.
Thank you, Councilman Smiley. No, I understand. We've looked at this issue over the last probably 4 years, and one of the challenges with doing that is the type of employee that is actually coming through this professional service. Some of them have immigration related to the job that they're currently in with their current employer. That creates a challenge for them to change employers. So we have been looking at this, and as even with the Chief Bailey's predecessor, we have been converting some of the contractors that we could into City of Memphis employees, but it is a process, and it does have some challenges.
So, okay, I think I get it.
If I could offer just one other, we are making progress. Again, about the time that we moved into the space, we got that done, and then the administration moved forward. The professional services you see here, there used to be one line with one vendor for $10 million. And we contracted with that one vendor for $10 million, and worked pretty hard to break that apart so that we had more opportunities for more companies to provide the services as a step in the right direction. That was no small feat. It took us about a year and a half of legal wrangling to get that thing finalized. So, and it was not a friendly parting of ways. So I'll just leave it there. So continuing to march down the direction of trying to get this right.
So I'm assuming, no, I'm not assuming. So I would be hopeful there is a plan in place, whether it's I'm assuming there'll be a long-term plan, in place to see some of these services come in-house, meaning we're hiring more city employees and reducing this large number here at the bottom.
We will definitely do our best. I wanted to go back to your other question about the lease. We renewed it. We signed the new lease June of 2020, so it was renewed for 5 years. So we have 5 more years.
5 more years. Okay, that means Chief McGowan is going to negotiate a great deal for at some point, right?
We'll do that, and we also, as you know, we've contemplated. We brought before you the opportunity to acquire a new facility that will afford us the opportunity to bring folks in-house. So we'll work on consolidating a number of, not just the employees, which is what you're talking about now, but back to the facility. We have the opportunity to potentially consolidate into a facility, and we'll work on doing that sooner than later if we can.
Absolutely. There's a pretty large building downtown that's pretty much vacant that we can probably consider as well.
There are several. One we might be partners in. So.
All right, thank you, Archie.
All right, thank you. Councilman Warren.
Yeah, just a couple things. the types of employees that you've got here, they're highly specialized for IT. And I'm wondering, is that something that's better to have as contract labor or bring in? Is that one of the reasons that we do it? The other question I had was, why did we initially start putting the cost of software into IT instead of allocating it into individual departments so we could get an idea of how much IT each department actually needs? And do you have plans to actually do that over the next year or two to put that out? So two-part question. Thank you.
Great questions, Councilman Warren. For the employees, yes, it is quite difficult to get some of those specialized skills, especially locally. We've had some challenges. If we need specific skill sets, it's just harder. And so sometimes we have to go outside and get those contract individuals because that's where it's available.
But you won't necessarily continue to need that skill set. You need that skill set for a specific time period, and then you don't need it any longer.
No, we will need that skill set. If we implement something like our Oracle Fusion, which is our HCM for the entire enterprise, we have to have skilled individuals to be able to support it and maintain it. If we get into the situation where we have to always call the vendor to come in to do any maintenance, then it's a lot more money. And so it's better to have well-trained individuals on staff than to always have to have those high-cost maintenance and support contracts for those different applications. So
our goal is to actually try to make sure that we cherry-pick these companies if we can and possibly hire their employees.
Well, not necessarily their employees. I cannot go on record saying that, Councilman Warren, but we will do what we can to make sure we can staff with the right skill, because that's very important. It's not just about having the body there. We want the skill, because when you don't have the skill set, then you have to spend training dollars to get them up to speed. So we're going to spend no matter what from an IT division, so we have to figure out what makes the most sense. Your second question, could you repeat it for me, please?
Yes, ma'am. When do you have a plan to, I guess, allocate the IT expenses from your department to the correct department, so we get a better idea of how much each department is needing for IT?
So we've had this conversation in the ITD since I've been there, because I didn't really understand how we could continue to take on some costs that we can't project. If a division purchases some software and they purchased it for the practice was they purchased it the first year, and then IT would normally take it on as maintenance the second year. A lot of times we wouldn't even know that it had been purchased until we get the bill that we have to pay the maintenance and support. So we could not even project. So now what we are hoping to do at the beginning of this FY is to have discussions with the divisions about the cost that we're paying for them. I have a breakdown of what that is, and see if they can't do it in this fiscal year, can they begin putting that in their budget for the next one to help relieve some of the costs for us.
I guess the thing that makes sense to me is that I still would want you to see all those costs.
Yes.
But so maybe they allocate it to you and then you charge it back to their divisions in some way.
I feel like you've been eavesdropping on some of our meetings, Councilman Warren. That's exactly, we do have a chargeback process for our phone bills, and so we've been talking about that as well. The more that we could allocate in that way would be ideal, and every division has a software line. And so it's really easy to charge to that particular account line. So we would still have very much a lot of oversight into that. And what we have been doing, though, to help us is working very closely with the purchasing department. So when a division makes an IT request, purchasing will send it to us for approval so that we're not blindsided by the purchase, and so that we can help the division if they need anything from us to make sure that we're all aware of what's being requested.
And it helps us as we're trying to follow the budget when it works like that too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And if I could add to, it's a great question, Councilman Warren, and we've been working on this. We do have a mechanism, for instance, if someone needs a laptop, what you don't want is the division going out and buying a laptop, right? And then bringing it in and then taking it to IT going, I need all of our applications on this. So we centralize all of that through IT division, and then IT knows that if it's a laptop for finance, that it must have Oracle and Hyperion and all of those things specific that's loaded onto it specifically for us. If it's for engineering, it could have different software that we function that through. But then you do see a chargeback to the division. So that we are trying to do exactly what you're talking about, capture what is the true cost of this, and then how much is each division actually being allocated as a part of that expenditure.
In that scenario, the IT cost would be the labor and the capital, putting the software in the computer and the time necessary to record it and do that. So that would be the cost for IT for that, correct?
Right. So we have the capital purchase itself, and then the application load and software. And then so that you know that my cost for the finance division could be different than another division that doesn't have to have the same software that I have to have.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Johnson?
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate the importance. I can understand why you have contract employees. Technology changes so quickly. I mean, within 6 months, my experience was you would buy one application, and then 6 months later, you found out that it's no longer being serviced, and then you had to go out and find an expert to come in. And unfortunately, we just cannot afford to keep on training the staff fast enough to keep up with, because you'll be limited. So the cost is definitely out there, and it's still difficult in order to track what IT is doing for each division, because you have to look at, is that an IT issue or is that an individual department issue? And it's a thin line. There's a lot of friction sometimes between the departments and IT, but working together, I'm sure it'll all work out. But I mean, I don't like the contract concept, but I do understand the need for it in this particular situation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. You're exactly right.
Thank you. Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to you, Ms. Bailey. And
Ms. Harris.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, you all. I have a couple of questions. The first one is going back to the lease. Was that a $111,000 increase? So we were at $296 last year, and we.
Let me look at it from last year to this year.
Well, I'm just taking the $397 and subtracting the $190,
yes.
the $111.
Yes.
So almost a 30% increase in 1 year.
Not for the complete lease. Hang on one second.
Okay.
Let's see exactly what.
So where I'm going, so look at page 8. That's for the 111,776, and then I guess we're projecting what the cost will be this year, being that $397 someplace that I saw.
So last year the lease amount was $385,127. That was the amount last year. Now it's $397,278. And so let me find where you are. What page again?
So page 8.
Oh, right here. Okay.
And then when we look at the page for rent.
I see what you're saying. I don't think that's actually right, Councilman Jones, because the amount last year was $385,127. Okay. And this year it is $397,278.
Okay, so well, you know what? I see that on page 21, but I guess we're saying there's some type of discrepancy here. I see the numbers, but we're still saying that there's some type of year-over-year change in expenditures.
2 to 3%. They go up between 2 to 3% for our rent for both buildings, for both sides.
I get that.
So yeah, let me get the right number.
Okay, thank you. So I just noticed that. Secondly, talk to me a little bit more about the cybersecurity help.
Yes.
I think, was it Atlanta that may have had a ransomware incident a couple of years ago?
Back, yes.
Yeah, and so with everything that took place recently with Colonial Pipeline,
yes.
It would provide some comfort to me and probably my colleagues as well to know that we are on top of it. We're doing all we can. We have the resources.
Absolutely.
Without reviewing where we're weak. Yeah.
No, we have a excellent cybersecurity team
Okay.
led by our IT security manager, Augustin Boateng. He and his team are doing a fantastic job. They have implemented lots of new security features. We've upgraded our endpoint security. We've done compliance training or in the process of annual compliance training for our users. We do a security newsletter that comes out once a month. And so we wanted someone who is specific for public safety. When there is a security issue anywhere in the country, our police team will send me that information so that I'm aware in case I was not, because they have the same concern. And we want them to be assured that we are doing the absolute best for them. And so we want to bring on a security analyst certified in public safety. They would be CJIS certified, and they would work specifically for fire and police.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, what about, I guess, non-fire and police? You know, just, and I'm thinking about this whole ransomware type of situation.
Yeah, I feel very comfortable that we are in a great position. We have a very responsive and not a reactionary security team. They're very proactive. They are working on pen testing so that we work to see, you know, what could happen without us even knowing it. And a lot of us may be under a pen testing type of scenario just to see what they can get in to our system, right? So I have no doubt that our security team is one of the best. We are small in number, and of course they would like to be larger, right? But, you know, we have to balance between the budget. But they are doing a fantastic job. Anything that comes up, and of course we get, you know, all kinds of things that come through for our hits and people who want to try to get into the system. But we have firewalls in place, and they have excellent measures in place for us to be protected.
Point of information, what is a pen test?
It's a penetration test that an outside agency will try to see what they could, if they could get into your system in various different ways. We're also implementing single sign-on. That should be coming on in the next few weeks. That helps us to kind of eliminate some of the password dynamics that are out there in the environment. It helps us to have one password type to get into every application. So they are excellent. I think they could not only do this government size, they could also be a dynamic security for even a bigger government because of the practices. And they study and they learn and they research and they connect with other agencies to make sure that they are in alignment. So I'm not worried about that. I just want to make sure public safety has a little bit more assurance that we are focusing on them. And so that's why we're going to have that specific person.
Okay. And then my next question is, I'm on page 20, salaries, part-time, temporary. We have a jump of 270 some odd thousand. So to account for that.
So on that, we parked our ISL funds. So we haven't finished the HR process for those positions.
Okay.
So once those positions are approved through the HR and compensation process, then we'll move that funding to the full-time line, and then we'll be able to hire and bring them on.
Okay, but so your full-time salaries pretty much is the current
right now.
Okay.
Minus those 4 ISLs.
Gotcha.
And so those, we only have one part-time individual in the division. So the rest of that money will be for those full-time positions, and we will just move that funding.
Okay.
Yes.
And then my last question is dealing with broadband. You know,
Okay.
we have allowable expenditures, and you know, this is something I've talked about throughout this. Once I saw that it was an allowable function. Talk to me about where we are, what our capabilities are, because I've talked to people outside the city who, and I'll just share with my colleagues, somebody said, well, we have fiber optic lines that are underutilized, that are just dormant, stagnant, that maybe it's something missing on the end user side, or maybe the terminology that I'm using may be incorrect, but when we're talking about available monies, we can expand it, put the right router or all the stuff in place in order to make it accessible.
Yes,
that was information that I got from somebody who may or may not be knowledgeable about what the city has.
Okay.
So I just wanted a little bit more insight as we talk about budget, as we make our priorities for this next year, particularly with the American Recovery Plan dollars.
So I listened to you actually talk about this on yesterday, and I know that you've reached out.
Sound like a broken record, don't it?
Actually, no. You want to know what you want to know, and so we should be able to provide you with that information. And I know that you and I have had conversations along with the other CIOs in the area, Shelby County, MLGNW, and Shelby County Schools. And so a lot of our unused fiber is in a legal matter, and I would like for COO McGowan to kind of speak to the broadband plan.
Thank you. Councilman Jones and I spoke a little bit about that. There are two efforts underway for the, quote, underused fiber that we have in the city. One was a broadband initiative in North Memphis at the Saints Courts Apartments in that area, and so that was a pilot project for how you might be able to use that. The second is in the Soulsville area. A private donor helped put together the capital for that test. We have an outside consultant who has given us, because it's a complex issue that deals with public and private and how you move forward with offering what is currently offered in the private realm to people as a public service at low cost. So, but she has developed a plan for how we might roll out broadband, the areas that we might roll it into. Some of that is a mix of using the existing fiber, as you mentioned. Others is new infrastructure that would have to go into place. So we have the one pilot location up and operating. The second, which will be in Soulsville, should be coming online this summer, and we'll learn a little bit from that. As we talked about, Councilman Jones, lots of discussions happening behind the scenes of just organizing people around the issue of how we organize to accept the new money for broadband. And so I think there's exciting time and much more to follow on that. But certainly we are looking, the lowest hanging fruit is to take advantage of what's available to us. And as Ms. Bailey said, there is still some lingering potential litigation in and around the Memphis network's existing infrastructure that we have. So can't go too deep into it about the status of that until that's all resolved. But we are working on that particular piece.
Okay. And so when you say low-hanging fruit, are there any opportunities during this upcoming fiscal year to take advantage of that low-hanging fruit? And if it is it reflected in this budget?
The ones that we had for this fiscal year were those two pilot areas to receive some data back, and then to begin this fiscal year was really about the planning through the Accelerate Memphis program. That's where we had allocated that money. But Ms. Bailey and her team, people from engineering, people from the Department of Planning and Development, HCD, we're hiring through HCD, through one of their grant programs, hiring a permanent person who wakes up every day and does nothing but broadband for us, so that we're going to bring on some expertise in-house. So we are making some investments this year in trying to bring this to life and realize its promise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Councilman Jones, in our CIP presentation that we did last week, in an area for our infrastructure that you all approved, we do have some initiatives that we would like to do surrounding expanding our public access.
Yeah, but your capital was very small.
I'll do with what I can with what I have. But I mean,
that's not the secret.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Smiley?
Do we keep tally of how many, hacking attempts that we receive?
Yes, I get that data from our security manager on a monthly basis.
Okay.
And it's pretty high. I can send you the report so that you can see what it looks like.
I would love to see it.
I will get that for you.
I think all members on the council will want to take a look at that.
I will absolutely.
So we can just see,
I will definitely get that to you. It's an interesting visual.
And I would like to see how successful we are. Also, I want to just publicly, I think the entire council, thank Andy, because every time my computer goes down, and I know, I've been on this council, a little bit on this. Just give Andy a clap. I think he's done an excellent job. I know I done messed up a number of computers and everything else technology related, and I don't think I'm alone. So I'm not sure if Andy is really a part of the council staff, but we consider a part of the council staff. So we appreciate you a lot. Yeah. And we look forward to keep working with you. Thank you so much.
Andy is amazing.
He's council staff. I just want you to know that.
Andy is amazing, and we're hoping to at least try to get an Andy Jr. So that Andy will feel comfortable taking a day off. Andy does not take time off, and so we're looking at, on our board, it's called an Andy Jr. We cannot replace Andy.
I moved to second that.
We will definitely, we're working on an Andy Jr. so that he can feel good about, being away if he needs to.
We still gonna call him, but okay.
He's gonna answer. He's gonna answer. Exactly.
Well, just thank you. We really appreciate it, Andy.
Thank you very much, Councilman Smiley. Councilwoman Logan.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Bailey, for your presentation, and to your staff. Y'all are doing a great job. And I too love Andy and appreciate him always being there. My question is about page 17, the contract, the list of professional services. And I know I heard that you all say that we're working on bringing some of those in-house, but in the interim, in terms of the contracts and looking for qualified and talent in our qualified contractors and talent in our city, what is the process for informing business owners or contractors about the positions that are open and available, or about the work that you're needing done? And especially within the MWBE community.
Yes, ma'am. Very, very good question. So in addition to the normal HR process of putting a job posting together, we also have a really good partnership with Tech 901. We try to work with them closely so that we can get talent. Just on this coming Friday, I'm having a meeting with Director Griffith with the youth services as well as Code Crew to see how we can utilize some of their resources and individuals to help us fill some gaps in the ITD. And so we want to make sure we're partnering not only externally, but also with the internal staff to see what we can do. So it's a collaboration between Code Crew as well as Memphis Youth Services to make sure that we can see how we can pull in some talent. IT talent is very unique. It's different and it's specialized. And there are some people in the city that's doing great work to train individuals. Black Girls Code is working with younger girls to get them interested in the field. And so there are a lot of organizations that we can tap into. But this coming Friday, we will be meeting with youth services as well as Code Crew to see if we can fill some resource needs.
Okay, so thank you for that, and I'm glad to hear that. For the large jobs that you have, or that you would get a contract for or bid out, such as the IT, fiber, and cabling, I know there are some companies that are really have great capacity that could possibly do it. Do you put out? Is this something that you would put out an RFP or RFQ or put out for bid? And if so, does Director Massey's department assist with that in finding minority and women and Black-owned businesses?
Yes, ma'am. We recently completed an RFP for our networking cabling services. We had been in a contract with one vendor for some time. And so Chief McGowan asked me to look at that a little bit differently and kind of share some insight. And so that's what we did. We put out the RFP. Now we have a vendor pool of 4 other companies that are certified through Joanne Massey's office that can now do low voltage for us. And so that expands what we can do. We can get more individuals involved. It's not under one particular vendor. So we have done exactly what you're asking us to do, Councilwoman Logan. And I think it's going to be a great partnership with those companies to give them an opportunity to take advantage of some of the work we have.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Chief McGowan, for that. I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that we're doing that, and hopefully we're doing it in all of the departments and areas to see where we can expand opportunities for these companies. Appreciate it. You're back, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from council members? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to move to a voice vote. All those in favor of the operating budget for information technology, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Opinion chair, the ayes have it. The IT operating budget is approved.
Thank you all. Have
Thank
a
you.
great day.
Chief Ford?
Thank you, council members. I just want to bring something back up because I feel it when you start to ask that question. When we ask for an ISL or an increased service level, and we bring that to you, and we had several divisions that have done that, we do not add that complement into our salaries amount until you approve it. So it does look a little weird because it gets parked on that part-time line. But so what we do is estimate the value of that position plus benefits and put it there. Should you approve all of the positions that you, through our budget process, we then move that before we print the adopted budget so that those new ISLs appear in the salaries line as opposed to the part-time line. So Comptroller Morris and I talked about that for our proposed book, we should give you a separate line that just says ISL so you know immediately, and it doesn't overinflate that part-time salaries line because it does kind of ruin the integrity of that line, especially when you're looking at a trend line. So that's a change that we will make for you just so you will know, and it'll be clearly identified. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council members, let's go to a break. What's that? We did our vote. It was approved. I have you voting in favor. Okay. Well, there's no food now, but let's take a break till 3:50, 3:55. Well. I heard moved by Councilman Jones, second by Councilman Warren. Judge Sugarman, if you'll introduce yourself, and then the floor is yours for the presentation. We'll hold questions until the end.
Judge Tarek Sugarman. I have been a city court judge now since 1998. I've been the administrative judge, I think, for the past 3 budgets, maybe 4. Took over from Judge Doris. There's not really much in change from our 2021 budget. We do, I think, need to address the fact that we have 2 open positions. We had to let our interpreter, court interpreter, who was also an assistant in our office, go, and that was in March. And because of the restrictions due to the COVID situation, we had not filled that position. We were waiting actually until, and we've been.
And I may just pause you for a second. Can you make sure that mic is on at the green light? We've got some council members listening in, and that helps them immensely.
Okay, now it's
there we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we had not filled that position. Of course, as you're aware, Judge Jones passed in mid-January, and that position is soon to be filled. Judge Watkins will be coming on the 1st of June, and so that's the other position that's still vacant on there. The spending, of course, was very limited due to COVID. We have not had much in terms of expenditures, in terms of materials. That we do have in terms of vendors outside is I think we spent about 43% of our budget with some of the office needs, and we have 100% on the minority and women businesses in terms of our usage, what we use the funds for. I'd be glad to address, of course, our salaries remain the same. All of the things remain the same. We're actually below our projected budget for expenditures in 2020, I'm sorry. Of course, that's due to limited usage for outside vendors, no printing, not much in the way of materials, and no travel during the year of 2020. Actually, in March, during the 2021 budget, the only travel we had was to New Orleans. That was for a judicial conference, and we shut down shortly after then. And I'd be glad to address any questions you have regarding the budget.
Any comments or questions from council members? Pretty straightforward. Thank you for coming down. All those in favor of the city judge's operating budget signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Paying the chair, the ayes have it. Operating budget for city judges is approved.
All right. Thank you. You all have a good day.
Thank you very much. All right. Next up is the library services operating budget. Can I get a motion and a second? Motion by Councilman Smiley and second by Councilman Johnson.
Thank you.
All right. Director McCoy, if you will just introduce yourself and your team, and then the floor is yours for presentation, and we'll hold questions until the end.
Okay. I'm Keenan McCoy. I'm the director of the Memphis Public Libraries, and this is Cecilia Showers, who is our finance manager and was previously in finance. And then this is Chris Marthlack, who's our deputy director. All right. So this year we are kind of holding steady, as it were. So we are not asking for or requiring any additional funding this year. We are basically going at maintenance level. So we are prioritizing on our, STEAM activities, job readiness, early literacy, grade level reading. We've got Discover Read centers in 12 of our branches, and those are early childhood literacy, talk, touch, read, sing, play kind of activities that are in most of our branches, and it basically gives the caregivers an opportunity to interact and engage with and bring out more words and more colors and more songs and just kind of focus on a different type of learning. I think y'all are familiar, hopefully, with our programming team. We have the Connect crew. We have a number of mobile vehicles, so that we can go throughout the city, because a lot of people can't get to Ben Hooks or Cloud 901 or whatever. So just to make library activities accessible to the community is a top priority. Clearly, we have Cloud 901, and it's booming. And we also, you probably heard through the pandemic that Link and 211 have done an extraordinary job answering 500 or 600 calls many days, getting information and resources out for people who have food insecurity, housing insecurity, all that. Our staff during the pandemic have also just gone as many different places as they possibly can. 66 employees were delivering Meals on Wheels, working with the food bank, working with MIFA, while we were at limited capacity within the facility. So, and then we also bought a ton more ebooks and audiobooks during the pandemic, just because a lot of people were afraid that they might catch COVID from paper. So, at any rate, so we've got sorry, and y'all can interrupt. I mean, if I'm going fast or you don't, if you, nope. However it goes. So the bridge, page 5, we do have some encumbrances which are rolling forward. One of the things, the largest roll forward is library books, and that is largely associated with paper books, actually, because when the pandemic came, no publishers were really putting out paper books because they didn't want their best-selling, New York Times best-selling authors or whomever, dropping a book that actually wouldn't be received. So anyway, so that's a large part of the reason for the library books, like we're carrying over those encumbrances. So I think that's mostly. Anything else? Okay. On page 7, I take responsibility for this. We have an error. It shows the program comparative spending from FY20 and FY21. It's actually FY21 to FY22. So just coming up, just want to let y'all know this is kind of what we're looking at for the future. So you can see on page 8, you can see expenditures, personnel services, M&S, and capital outlay. Capital outlay, we aren't really spending any money on furniture at this time, but library books are definitely our largest priority, or one of the largest priorities. And so we're encumbering a pretty fair amount from those, and then we're carrying over some money for facilities, repair, and janitorial services and security. Not much, obviously. We have $2 being encumbered for janitorial. Yeah. So we're going to just roll that on over. So on page 10, we have local shared revenue. The $555,000 is revenue from Shelby County. And we operate the East Shelby branch, and the county reimburses us 100% of the costs that are incurred. And so they just reimburse us, and then the city of Bartlett likewise does the same, the $1,034,000. City of Bartlett, we invoice them. The county pays in advance for a year, and Bartlett pays quarterly. But they both always contribute, yeah. We do have the other request for a change here, which I'm sure y'all will not mind, or I'm guesstimating that I'm assuming that you will not mind, is on the FY22 proposed budget. Last year, or for fiscal year 21, we did not budget funding for fines and fees because we eliminated fines, and we didn't know what was going to happen because of the pandemic. We didn't know if anybody was going to come in or not. We still do charge fees, but the fees are only for public copiers, pretty much. But to date, we've got 94,800 as of this month. We have $94,800 that we have received for copier costs, copier fees. And so we talked to Comptroller Morris and wanted to go ahead and increase the proposed budget as $120,000 revenue. Mm-hmm. That way, that'll be $120,000. That's our biggest, that's our greatest cost, revenue source or revenue stream at this point, since we don't actually charge the fines. So if we could just add that to our budget, we were just at base, maintenance level funding, and this will be just an additional $120,000 that we're assuming will hit
by June 30th.
By June 30th, and for next year. So, so we've got on page 11, you see the 94,980 actually. Yeah. So our complement is the same as it was last year. So we have not increased our complement. We had 285 employees, and we've got the same number this year. The authorized complement remains exactly the same. So we do have some vacancies, and some of those are in the process, or many of those are in the process of being filled as we speak. So major M&S expenditures, utilities we have about $5 million in M&S expenses. The largest item for that is utilities. And so you can see the $4,685,967. Utilities is number 1, library books number 2, security number 2, library books number 3, and then the rest you can see kind of going down, but this is just what each of the percentages are. And so it's like in total, it's about $5 million. So on the professional services, Loomis Armored, one, we have IT, Cengage and Track Systems. For Loomis Armored Guard Services, we have about $30,000 budgeted annually, and that is, for them to collect, either fines or fees from all the various libraries. We used to do that with literally, mail envelopes, and we just didn't want to put those employees in harm's way. So this is actually managed through the Treasury Department. So the various vendors for the youth programs mobile, that's through the Connect crew, and it's just a matter of contracting with various vendors to be able to provide the highest quality programming we can to go throughout almost all of Shelby County, really. So HR Interfund, the ID badges, these are, city employee IDs. Lily Bees is our one catering service that we pay for through the city, and that is to honor the volunteers, because we have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. So that's our once a year volunteer recognition program. And then lastly is corporate video. That is through WYPL, our radio and TV station, and they, they do track some of the videos and movies that come out that are related to WYPL. And then for the MWBE participation, our overall spend is 85.65% for Memphis Public Libraries. And so you can see the stats there. We have 75% certified spend and 76% certified spend, and then the non-certified, we definitely try to reach whoever we can who is, even if they're non-certified, just try to reach out to as many parts of our community as we possibly can. So let's see. So with the 5-year expense trend report, I don't know if you'll have questions. I know the print gets pretty small there, but you can see, you know, kind of the increases or the change in the past 5 years from FY18 to FY22. We made that change.
Yeah, we was just
There's something I missed out on?
matching back over.
Okay.
FY21 to make sure
What
that
about
we,
the COVID adjustment?
the 61,000, no, we was matching back over to make sure that we had the FY21 and that we had the years mixed up.
So I think, yeah, so I think if y'all have any questions, we'd be happy to entertain them.
All right, we've got some council members in the queue. We'll go to Councilman Warren first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that everybody on the council knew what a great job the library did in addition to the Parks Division when we started with our COVID emergency, and how they sort of stepped up and filled amazingly a number of positions that needed to be filled. It was really great to see your staff and everyone there doing what they needed to do to help the city. And I just want to thank you again and just publicly acknowledge what a good job you did. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilwoman Johnson?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming for the presentation. But I think my question goes to Chief Ford. Does Memphis Light, Gas, and Water give the city any type of discount on utilities for city property?
Not against the law. Yeah.
Give the school free water and then they stop.
The parks too.
Well, I remember that. Thank you.
It's against the law.
Any other council members? Okay, I've got one, just, it's a nitpicky question on insurance under materials and supplies. So it's page 21. Yeah, towards the bottom of page 21, where it's kind of spiked up and down a little bit, where y'all's actual in 2020 was 136, and then you budgeted for 99 last year, but it was actually 172, and you're proposing 99 again for this budget. Is there a reason it spiked up in the past year?
Excuse me, I think the simplest answer for that is that we actually work with risk management, and the city attorney's office provides us the number every year. We don't actually participate in that process. Okay. So, but they do it based on, and we've had a number of, you know, I think the fluctuation could be partly we've had some flooding at a library. We've had, you know, air conditioning go out of a library. You know, we've had a number of.
I was looking at our loss runs libraries, where a couple of them were actually about half of them. Okay. And I didn't know if that got passed on to y'all.
So we work with risk management. We work with, you know, with them to, and they do everything I think that they can to support us. But yeah, but they give us the number. It was like $300-something thousand some years ago. And
I'll take that up with Chief Singh. All right. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from council members? Thank you all for all the great work you've done in a very difficult year. Seeing no one else in the queue, I assume you're all ready to move to a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the library services operating budget signify by saying aye. Aye. As amended. As amended. And all those opposed? Opinion Chair, the ayes have it. Library services operating budget request is approved as amended. Thank you all very much. Any other business before the committee today? Seeing none, everybody enjoy the good weather and the weekend. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.